I'm Selena. The red and blue lights strobed against the glass of my parents' dining room, and the sound of sirens grew louder. My mother's face lost all color, and she reached across the table, her voice breaking. My father's fist slammed the armrest, rattling the silverware. I sat there, my hands folded neatly in my lap, watching as the officers entered. In that moment, I knew there was no turning back. It all started at that fateful dinner. I sat across from my parents at their long mahogany table. The china glistened under the chandelier, and the whole setting was so formal and controlled, just the way they liked it. My mother, Isabella, poured another glass of wine, while my father, Victor, slid a thick envelope across the table. Selena, he said smoothly, this is about security for you, for all of us. I rested my hands in my lap, trying to steady my breath. The envelope lay between us like a challenge. My mother smiled as if she were offering me a great gift. It's just a formality, one family, one future. I pulled out the papers and scanned the first page. The words blurred for a moment, but the intent was clear. Every account, every investment, every property I had built over the years was to be placed into a family trust managed solely by them. My father nudged a pen closer. This way, we all move forward together. No more silos, no more risk. Inside, I felt a knot forming. They weren't just asking, they were demanding everything I had spent my adult life creating. I looked up slowly and caught the faint triumph in their eyes, the expectation that I would cave in out of duty or guilt. Instead, I let my lips curve into a calm smile. If this is truly about trust, then you won't mind what I've prepared. For the first time that evening, their expressions faltered. My mother's fingers tightened around the stem of her glass, and my father's jaw flexed. Just then, the butler stepped into the dining room. "Ma'am," he said, his voice formal but edged with tension, "your lawyer is here." I leaned back in my chair, my heart steady. The real conversation was about to begin. When my lawyer, Ava, walked in with her briefcase, I felt the weight of my parents' stares intensify. Before she even spoke, my mind drifted back to the years that had led me to this moment. In my early 20s, the city of Austin was changing rapidly. Neighborhoods were gentrifying at a pace that was hard to keep up with. While my friends were out partying on weekends, I saw an opportunity. I was down on my hands and knees in run-down kitchens, stripping tiles, painting cabinets, and breathing life back into homes that most people wouldn't even look at twice. My hands were blistered, and my back ached, but I didn't give up. I reinvested every dollar I made, using the profit from one house flip to make the down payment on another. At 26, I signed the papers on my first Craftsman duplex. Holding those keys felt like holding proof that hard work and discipline mattered more than family background. But when I showed my parents, their reaction was a dismissive laugh. "You were just lucky the market turned," my mother said. "Without us, you'd never make it," my father added. Their words stung, but nothing hurt more than the memory of when I asked them to co-sign my student loan in college. They refused, saying it would teach me responsibility. It did teach me, but not in the way they intended. I worked double shifts, skipped meals, and lived in a tiny, moldy basement apartment. Their refusal cut me deeply, but it also made me stronger. Over time, I went from one duplex to 3 properties, then 5. I learned to negotiate, to anticipate market changes, and to stand up to contractors who tried to belittle me. Every decision, every deal, and every mortgage I paid off was my own achievement. My parents never helped me, yet they acted as if my success was because of them. Looking back, I realized that the contract on the dinner table wasn't a sudden idea. My parents had been testing the waters for years. My mother would casually say over coffee, "You should merge finances. Family should stick together. What's the point of keeping things separate if we're all working towards the same future?" My father preferred to use guilt. "After all we've done for you, don't we deserve to feel secure? Money should stay within the family." At first, I brushed off their comments. I thought it was just their way of trying to stay relevant in a world that was leaving them behind. But their words always left a sting. One day, I came home early from a property showing and found my father in my apartment. The lease was in my name, and the locks were new, but there he was, rummaging through the drawer where I kept my property deeds and bank statements. He looked up, startled, and then forced a smile. "Just curious," he said, as if that gave him the right to invade my privacy. I forced a laugh and told myself he was old-fashioned. But when he left, I noticed that the envelope with my latest closing statement was out of place. Deep down, I started to suspect that it wasn't love that made them do these things. It was a sense of entitlement. Their talk of unity and legacy grew louder over time, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. By the time the contract appeared on the dinner table, I knew I was right. Ava's arrival was like a breath of fresh air. She stepped into the dining room, her eyes cool and assessing. My parents stiffened, clearly not expecting me to have an ally. "Good evening," Ava said smoothly, setting her briefcase on the table. "I understand there's a contract my client is supposed to sign." My mother's smile cracked. "This is a private family matter. There's no need for lawyers." Ava ignored her and started flipping through the papers. Her brow arched higher with each page, and then she smirked. "Wow," she murmured, closing the folder with a snap. "This isn't a trust. It's a complete transfer of authority. If Selena signs this, you'll have total control over her assets." The silence that followed was suffocating. My father was the first to recover. "It's about trust, Ava. We're trying to protect the family from risk." His voice was calm, but the muscle in his jaw betrayed his nervousness. "Interesting," Ava replied evenly. "Because what I see is a document where Selena loses all rights to her own money. If it's really about trust, why is she the only one giving up something?" My mother leaned forward, her tone sickly sweet. "You know us, Selena. We'd never hurt you. This is just a formality." I sat back and looked directly at them. "We're finished here tonight." For the first time, I saw fear in their eyes. It flickered across their faces before they tried to hide it, but I caught it. I pushed my chair back, knowing they wouldn't let this end easily. Just as I was about to stand up, my father's voice cut through the air. "Sit down, Selena. You're not thinking clearly." My mother's hand fluttered towards the untouched wine glass in front of me. "There's something you need to hear first," she said, her tone softer than before. "Something that changes everything." Against my better judgment, I sat back down. Ava stood behind me, her arms crossed, a reassuring presence. My father steepled his fingers and fixed me with a stare. "The Montgomery estate in Texas," he began, "has been tied up in probate for years, but the process is almost over. We're about to regain full control of the property and its assets. It's worth more than you can imagine." My mother leaned in, her smile false but warm-looking. "And of course, you're our daughter. You'll benefit as much as we do, but unity is essential. Probate courts like stability. If the family falls apart, the judges won't look kindly on it." The implication was clear. Sign the contract, prove my loyalty, and I'd be part of the inheritance. Refuse, and I'd be out. But I saw through their lies. The Montgomery estate wasn't a gift, it was a trap. They wanted to tie me down, not just by blood but by legal documents. My wealth had become their bargaining chip, and the so-called inheritance was the bait. I glanced at Ava, and her eyes told me she understood. This wasn't about legacy, it was about control. My father's glare hardened. "Without us," he said flatly, "you'll lose everything." I straightened my spine and took a deep breath. The irony was almost laughable. They had given me nothing, yet they were threatening to take it all. Ava placed a hand on my shoulder, a silent reminder that we weren't done. After that dinner, I knew I couldn't just talk it out. My parents weren't negotiating, they were cornering me. So the next morning, I hired a private investigator named Leo. He had a reputation for uncovering the truth, no matter how well it was hidden. Within a week, Leo placed a thick file on Ava's desk. We went through it together, and each page was a revelation. The Montgomery estate they had dangled in front of me was mortgaged to the hilt. It was collateral for loans they had taken out over the past decade. Their show of wealth, with antique furnishings and fancy galas, was just an illusion. Behind it all was years of reckless spending and desperate borrowing. But the worst was yet to come. Near the end of the file, there was an application for a new credit line with my forged signature. Someone had watched me sign documents so many times that they could mimic my signature well. I stared at the page until the lines blurred. Rage and disbelief welled up inside me. I thought about the small savings account they opened for me as a child. My father had lifted me up to the teller's counter and told me I was learning responsibility. Back then, I believed them. But now, looking at the forged document, I realized they were only teaching themselves how to access my money. Ava's voice broke through my thoughts. This isn't just manipulation, Selena. It's fraud, and it's criminal. The betrayal felt heavier than the paper in my hands. These were the people who raised me, who claimed to know what was best for me. Now they were stealing not just from my accounts but from my very identity. I set the file down and forced my hands to unclench. If they had crossed this line, I didn't know how far they would go. I knew I had to confront not only their debts but also the twisted logic that justified their actions. The forged credit line haunted me long after I left Ava's office. It wasn't just the act itself, it was what it revealed. Late at night, I lay awake, thinking about all the times they had let me down. When I was 11, I asked for art lessons, and they refused, saying I needed to focus on more important things. When I needed help with my college applications, they gave me a lecture about independence. And when I asked them to co-sign my first loan, they said it was tough love. For years, I thought those were just challenges that made me stronger. But now I saw them for what they were. Preparations for their exploitation. They were conditioning me to accept their neglect, so that when they tried to take my wealth, I might think it was normal. I felt a twinge of guilt, wondering if I was being unfair. After all, they had given me a roof over my head, of food and clothes. But I talked to Ava about it, and she looked me in the eye and said, "Protecting yourself isn't betrayal, Selena. Betrayal has already happened to you. Don't mistake self-defense for selfishness." Her words gave me the strength I needed. I wasn't the child they wanted to mold anymore. I wasn't going to bend under guilt or obligation. By the time I left Ava's office that evening, my resolve was clear. I was going to rewrite the ending of this story. Ava wasted no time. She brought in a forensic accountant named Finn. He was quiet but had a talent for following the money trail. Within days, he found a hidden offshore account in my parents' names. The statements were shocking. There were transfers from shell companies, loans on top of loans, and debts that seemed to go on forever. Ava's office became a war room. She put together a comprehensive file, including evidence of fraud, attempted forgery, and coercion. Each piece of evidence was airtight, like a nail in the coffin of their false image as caring parents. But I knew that facts alone wouldn't be enough. My parents were masters of using guilt. So I added something they couldn't ignore. Years ago, my grandmother's brooch and my grandfather's pocket watch had disappeared from the family safe. My parents said they were being appraised, but I always had a feeling there was more to it. Ava tracked down the pawnshop receipts, and I tucked them into Finn's report. It was proof that they had sold our family heirlooms for quick cash, showing that their theft went back years, into the very legacy they claimed to protect. When I looked at the growing pile of documents, I didn't feel any satisfaction, just clarity. They had built a tower of lies, and it was about to come crashing down. All I needed to do was give it a push. The next invitation from my parents came in the same fancy envelope. They thought I would come alone, but I walked into their dining room with Ava by my side. The table was set with crystal and silver, but I could feel the tension in the air. My father greeted me with his usual air of authority. "We trust you've reconsidered," he said, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. My mother's smile was brittle, her eyes full of false confidence. I sat down, but instead of opening the folder they had prepared for me, Ava placed our file in the center of the table. She opened it calmly. Offshore accounts, forged signatures, pawned heirlooms, and debts so high that the estate is a shell. My mother's face turned pale. She reached across the table, her voice breaking. "Selena, this isn't what it looks like. We were just trying to protect the family." My father's composure cracked. His fist slammed the armrest, and he shouted, "This is betrayal. After all we've done for you, you side with outsiders?" I met his fury with a steady gaze. "Family doesn't mean ownership. You've used me as your rescue fund. I won't be responsible for your debts." My mother's pleas turned into sobs, and my father's glare cut through the room. But they didn't have time to recover. The sound of sirens grew louder, and red and blue lights flashed against the glass. Ava closed the file and leaned back as the officers entered. My parents' faces crumbled under the weight of exposure. In the weeks that followed, news of the investigation spread. The Montgomery estate, once their pride and joy, was foreclosed. Creditors lined up at their doors, taking away what little was left of their false grandeur. I watched from a distance, not with pleasure but with a new-found clarity. Their downfall was their own doing. Meanwhile, I took steps to protect my own life. I secured all my property deeds, account statements, and important documents in a fireproof safe. I changed locks and updated passwords, making sure nothing was vulnerable. One evening, I sat across from Ava at a quiet wine bar. There were no contracts, no files, just 2 glasses of wine and a sense of relief. She raised her glass with a small smile. "To freedom hard-earned," she said. I clinked my glass against hers and echoed, "To freedom." As I walked home that night, the air felt lighter, and the city streets were full of possibilities. I realized that freedom was my true inheritance, and I was going to protect it with everything I had.